The Montana wilderness stretched out before Jack Harmon as he hiked through the dense forest of Gallatin National Park. At 43, with weathered skin that told stories of years spent outdoors, Jack was no stranger to these woods. The early May air carried the scent of pine and recent rain, a combination that always made him feel at home, despite living alone in his cabin on the outskirts of Bozeman for the past 5 years. Jack had left his job as a wildlife biologist with the Montana Department of Fish, Wildlife and Parks 2 years ago to focus on freelance environmental consulting and wildlife photography. Today, he was tracking a herd of elk, hoping to capture them in the golden hour light for a conservation magazine feature. The snapping of a branch caught his attention. Jack froze, his Canon camera poised. Instead of elk, he spotted movement near a fallen log, something small and tawny. Moving closer, Jack's trained eye recognized the unmistakable spotted coat of a bobcat cub, no more than 8 weeks old. "Hey there, little one," he whispered, scanning the area for the mother. The cub was alone, unusually thin, and appeared weak. Jack knew the protocol. Leave wildlife alone, especially young animals that might appear abandoned, but typically aren't. Yet something seemed wrong. The cub's labored breathing and lethargy suggested illness or injury. After 30 minutes of observation, with no sign of the mother, Jack made a decision that would change everything. "I can't just leave you here," he murmured, carefully wrapping the cub in his jacket. The tiny predator, too weak to resist, merely blinked up at him with cloudy blue eyes. The drive back to his cabin was filled with second-guessing. Jack had rehabilitated injured wildlife before during his career, but always through proper channels. Taking a wild animal home was illegal without proper permits, something he knew better than most. "Just for tonight," he told himself, glancing at the small bundle on his passenger seat. "Then I'll call Melissa at the Wildlife Center first thing tomorrow." His cabin came into view as dusk settled over the mountains. The simple structure, built from local timber with a wraparound porch, stood against the backdrop of towering pines. Inside, Jack cleared a space on his kitchen counter and gently placed the cub down for examination. The male cub was severely dehydrated and underweight. Using his old field kit, Jack carefully administered fluids with a syringe and prepared a warm nest from towels in a cardboard box near the wood stove. "There you go, buddy," he said, placing the cub in the makeshift bed. "Get some rest." As night fell over the Montana landscape, Jack sat at his kitchen table, scrolling through wildlife rehabilitation protocols on his laptop, while occasionally checking on his unexpected guest. The cub slept fitfully, its tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. When Jack finally headed to bed around midnight, he moved the box to his bedroom, wanting to keep the cub warm and monitor its breathing. He fell asleep to the sound of gentle purring from the cardboard box. At 3 a.m., Jack woke to a strange weight on his chest. Opening his eyes, he found himself staring directly into the face of the bobcat cub, which had somehow climbed out of its box and onto his bed. The cub had curled up against him, seeking warmth. "That's not part of the protocol," Jack whispered, but he didn't have the heart to move the small creature. Instead, he carefully adjusted his position to accommodate his new bedmate, acutely aware of the line he was crossing. Morning light filtered through Jack's bedroom window as he stirred awake, momentarily forgetting about his furry companion until he felt movement against his side. The bobcat cub had nestled into the crook of his arm, its condition noticeably improved from the previous day. "Morning, buddy," Jack said softly. The cub blinked at him, more alert than before, and let out a small mewl that sounded almost like a domestic kitten. But Jack knew better. This was a wild predator, not a pet. He reached for his phone to call Melissa Walker at the Montana Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, then hesitated. The cub seemed to be responding well to his care, and something about those blue eyes made him pause. One more day of stabilization might improve the cub's chances, he rationalized. Jack named the cub Finn, though he knew naming a wild animal was another professional line crossed. Over the next 3 days, Finn's health improved dramatically. Jack fed him a special formula recommended for orphaned carnivores and was relieved to see the cub's appetite returning. The planned one night stretched into 4 as Jack continuously found reasons to delay the call to the wildlife center. Finn began exploring the cabin, his natural curiosity emerging as his strength returned. Jack found himself laughing at the cub's antics as he pounced on shadows and practiced stalking skills on Jack's hiking boots. Each night, despite Jack's attempts to reinforce the box setup, Finn would somehow find his way to Jack's bed, curling up against him with a rumbling purr. And each morning, Jack would wake with a mixture of joy and guilt. On the 5th day, as Jack photographed Finn playing with a rolled-up sock, a knock at the door startled them both. Finn immediately darted under the couch. "Jack, you in there?" The voice belonged to Dave Martinez, a park ranger and former colleague. Jack quickly threw a blanket over Finn's supplies and opened the door, forcing a casual smile. "Dave, hey! What brings you out this way?" "Was in the area checking on reports of a mother bobcat found dead near Gallatin River," Dave said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Hit by a car, looks like. Had milk, so we're searching for cubs that might be orphaned." Jack's heart raced. "That's terrible. When was this?" "About a week ago. If there are cubs out there without a mother, they won't last long," Dave replied, glancing around the cabin. "Thought you might want to help with the search, given your tracking skills." A small sound came from under the couch, barely audible. Dave frowned. "What was that?" Before Jack could respond, Finn darted out from his hiding place, skidding across the wooden floor before stopping in the middle of the room, staring up at the ranger. Dave's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. "Jack, tell me that's not what I think it is." "I can explain," Jack began, but there was no explanation that would justify his actions professionally or legally. "Are you out of your mind?" Dave's voice rose. "You know better than this. How long have you had it?" 5 days. Found him alone, dehydrated. I was stabilizing him before taking him to Melissa," Jack said, the excuse sounding hollow even to his own ears. Dave ran a hand through his hair in frustration. 5 days, and you're sleeping with it?" He pointed to the obvious small indentation on Jack's bed, visible through the open bedroom door. The truth hit Jack like a physical blow. He had allowed his loneliness and emotional needs to cloud his professional judgment. What had started as a rescue had crossed into something inappropriate. A wild animal being treated as a companion. "I'll take him to the center right now," Jack said quietly. Dave's expression softened slightly. "I'll drive." "And Jack? This stays between us, but it can't happen again. You know that." As they prepared to leave, Jack carefully placed Finn in a proper transport carrier. The cub looked up at him with those blue eyes that were already beginning to change to their adult yellow-green. Something in Jack's chest tightened. "It's okay, buddy," he whispered. "You'll be with others like you. It's better this way." 6 months passed. October painted the Montana landscape in brilliant hues of gold and crimson as Jack drove the familiar road to the Montana Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. His truck climbed the winding path toward the facility, nestled against the foothills of the Bridger Mountains. After surrendering Finn, Jack had thrown himself into his work, taking on more conservation projects than ever before. He'd also started volunteering at the rehabilitation center 3 days a week, using his expertise to help with the various wildlife cases that came through their doors. It was his way of making amends, though Melissa had been surprisingly understanding about the Bobcat situation. "You made a mistake," she had told him, "but you also kept that cub alive when he likely would have died otherwise." Today wasn't a volunteer day. Today was special. Finn, now a juvenile bobcat approaching his first birthday, was being released back into the wild in a protected area of the national forest. Jack parked his truck and spotted Melissa waiting outside the main building, clipboard in hand. At 45, with silver streaking her dark hair, Melissa had been running the center for over 15 years and had seen it all when it came to human-wildlife interactions. "Morning, Jack," she greeted him with a warm smile. "Ready for the big day?" Jack nodded, his throat unexpectedly tight. "How is he?" "Wild," Melissa replied with emphasis. "Exactly as he should be. We integrated him with the other 2 orphaned bobcats months ago, and he's shown all the appropriate behaviors. Absolutely no human imprinting. The words were both a relief and, strangely, a disappointment. Jack had visited regularly during Finn's rehabilitation, but always as an observer, never interacting directly. He had watched from behind one-way glass as Finn grew from a wobbly cub into a sleek predator, learning to hunt live prey in the center's specialized enclosures. "That's great," Jack said, meaning it despite the complex emotions swirling inside him. They walked to the back of the facility, where Dave was already waiting beside his Forest Service truck. A large transport crate sat secured in the truck bed, containing Finn and the two other rehabilitated bobcats. "Jack," Dave acknowledged with a nod. Their relationship had recovered over the months, especially as Jack had demonstrated his commitment to proper wildlife protocols. The drive to the release site took nearly an hour, deep into protected territory where the young bobcats would have the best chance of establishing territories without human interference. Jack rode with Dave, while Melissa followed in a second vehicle with two volunteers. "No regrets?" Dave asked as they navigated a particularly rough stretch of forest road. Jack considered the question. About bringing him in that first night? No, he would have died otherwise. About keeping him too long and crossing lines? Plenty of regrets there. Dave nodded. "You know, in 15 years of service, I've seen plenty of well-intentioned people make similar mistakes. The difference is, most don't learn from them like you did." They arrived at a clearing surrounded by dense forest, perfect bobcat habitat with abundant prey, water sources, and minimal human activity. The team worked efficiently, positioning the crates facing the woods before stepping back to a safe distance. Melissa gave Jack a significant look. "Would you like to do the honors?" Jack hesitated, then nodded. He approached the crates and knelt before them, looking at the three pairs of eyes gleaming from within. He could immediately identify Finn, not just from the unique pattern of spots on his coat, but from something in his gaze, a wildness that had always been there, even in those first vulnerable days. "This is how it should be," Jack said softly, more to himself than the bobcats. He reached forward and simultaneously opened all three crate doors, using the remote release mechanism. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, as if synchronized, the three young bobcats bolted from their cages. Two immediately disappeared into the underbrush, but Finn paused at the forest edge. He turned back, and for a brief instant, his gaze met Jack's. There was no recognition there, no special connection, just the clear-eyed stare of a wild predator assessing a potential threat. It was exactly what Jack had hoped to see, yet it still caused an ache in his chest. With a flick of his tufted tail, Finn vanished into the forest, reclaimed by the wilderness where he belonged. The drive back was quieter. Jack stared out the window at the passing landscape, processing the mixture of loss and fulfillment that came with the successful release. "You know," Melissa said as they approached the center again, "we're getting a new group of volunteers next month. Could use someone to talk to them about the importance of proper wildlife protocols. Maybe share a personal perspective on why we don't bring wild animals home." Jack smiled, recognizing the opportunity for what it was, a chance to transform his mistake into a teaching moment. "I'd be honored." That evening, Jack returned to his cabin alone. The space felt different now, permanently altered by the brief presence of a wild creature who had shared his home and even his bed. He walked to his bedroom and noticed something he'd left on the nightstand months ago, but hadn't been able to put away. A small, perfect bobcat paw print pressed into a circle of clay, created during one of Finn's health assessments at the center. Jack picked it up, running his thumb over the tiny indentations. Then he placed it on his bookshelf alongside his wildlife biology textbooks and field guides, not as a memento of ownership, but as a reminder of responsibility. Outside his window, the Montana wilderness stretched into the distance, wild and untamed. Somewhere in those forests, a young bobcat was beginning his true life, exactly as nature intended, and for Jack, that knowledge was enough.